back to Wonder Women. If
Wonder
that's what it ends
Women?
up
Oh,
being
I
called.
like that. I hadn't heard that
Um,
one.
As long as it's not trademarked by DC, I think we
Yeah, we should
might be
Google
onto
that.
something. Well, back where we tell a story, true story, about women present and past who have done something amazing that's gone unappreciated, shall we
Yeah.
say, or noteworthy, who maybe haven't got the fame that they deserve or the fame it warrants.
Yeah.
And it's Vicky's turn today. I'm Simon.
I'm
It's
Vicky.
Vicky's turn to tell a story. So
Cool. Let's do it.
I'm ready.
I prepped this story months ago when it was International Women's Day, and I haven't really looked at the notes since. So if I go a bit back and forth with you, that's why. But it was too good a story not to put on the podcast because
Okay.
A, it's Olympic related. We're at
Cool.
Olympic City right now. And also this lady is French. So a French person did something
not be
really
more on
cool
point.
around. Exactly. I was like, we can't miss this opportunity. So I think everyone should know about her because she's just phenomenal. Her story is so, so cool. So are you ready?
Ready.
Ready. Shock horror. We're going to start in French.
Okay.
This lady's
Unexpected twist.
name is Alice Josephine Marie Milliat. What a name, first of
Strong
all.
name.
Alice
Yeah.
Josephine Marie Milliat. She was born on the 5th of May, 1884 in Nantes. She's the eldest of 5 children, and her parents were greengrocers, so really humble beginnings. Her mother later worked as a seamstress, and her father was an office worker. In 1904, the family moved to England, and that's where she met her husband, and she got married to Joseph Milliat. He was also from Nantes, so, it all kind of worked out. They didn't have any children, which is fine. That shouldn't really be a point. But he died in 1908, so they were only married for those 4 years. So,
Ouch.
yeah, quite a bit of tragedy and heartbreak.
That's right.
Whilst in England, Alice took up rowing, and after her husband's death, this is in the nicest way, this is when things got interesting. So she travelled widely.
That's when it got good.
That's when things got real. So she travelled widely. She learned loads of new languages. She actually became a translator because languages were her thing, which immediately I'm jealous of. I've always struggled with languages.
Thanks.
And then during the First World War, when that broke out, she actually returned to France. She was really sporty anyway, into swimming, hockey, rowing, all these things. The First World War led to women having to be more economically active, which we know they seized that opportunity to, what's that word, to
And their
contribute.
spot in the workforce.
Yeah, contribute to the economy. So that's kind of one timeline that's happening. So Alice is going through this horrible husband's death. She's going through trying to find herself. World War One is raging on. But at the same time, there's a guy called Baron Pierre de Coubertin. Just imagine that in a French accent. He revived the ancient Olympic game.
Okay.
So he's the guy who brought it back.
What was that, 1908 roughly, was it?
It was around then, wasn't it? It was really
Yeah.
similar timelines as when she was getting married. He's the villain of the story, and I don't want anywhere said that he even if you
I think
Google a
barons
picture of
usually are,
him,
aren't
even when you Google a picture of him, he does look like some movie villain that would be sat in an ivory tower, destroying the world. You know what I mean?
they? Yeah. There you go.
Oh yeah, exactly right. If you Google him, you'll be able to see, and you'll be
Okay.
like, oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Baron Pierre de Coubertin. So he founded these Olympic Games based on very old aristocratic, masculine ideals. The games were inherently sexist and classist. They were games for men, a certain kind of men, and only them alone. It wasn't open. It wasn't really for anybody. So even working class men were barred from the games. He compared women to weak members of society, from the children to the elderly, arguing they were not made for physical activity. Yeah. Are you ready for a quote? I should have prefaced this. There's going to be a lot of anger here, I think. So here's a quote. Direct Baron, this is direct. Baron said this. I do not approve of the participation of women in public competitions. In the Olympic Games, their primary role should be to crown the victors. Yeah, what a dick. So he argued that because of biological reasons, sports were too violent for women. Furthermore, he argued that women's athletic exhibitions would erode society's morals. by arousing the
It's the same
passions
arguments
of
that
male
sort of,
spectators.
but yeah, these same arguments come up over and over, don't they? It's like we can't possibly watch women do things that be too erotic for anyone else to watch, and
Yeah. And this is in
moral
1900
corruption. And,
something, isn't it? So the
yeah,
fact that you could totally see that someone tweeting that today, couldn't you? You could totally see that on Twitter. 100.
yeah. It
Exactly.
reminds me of like that whole crowning the victor reminds me of the pit girls they had until really recently in motorsport. It's like the men are there to do the racing and the dangerous stuff. The women are just there to be skimpy, or like the ring girls in boxing.
Do they not have pit
Um,
girls anymore?
no, a few years ago
Oh.
they were stopped because there was outcry about them mostly, and yeah, pit girls, grid girls. Let's stop.
Well, that's
No,
cool. I
it
didn't
might
know
have been
that.
10 years ago or so.
Oh
Yeah,
my God. I'm so happy. That's great news, though.
just
Great news for mankind.
ride that
100%.
fury, but yeah, some good news for you.
Thank you. Um, so while some might think that this attitude of Baron was like the attitude of the day, like he was just reflecting society, that's not really the case. Many men of the day argued that his attitude towards women was despicable. That's because it was. There's no need to argue
It's a
it.
reasonable argument.
It's
Yeah.
just, yeah, of course it would. And the public pressure grew so great that in the 1900 Olympic Games, women were actually allowed to participate. And he
Okay.
wasn't happy about that. So he basically got overridden. Even then, women were only allowed to participate in golf and tennis. So Althea would have been great at that. He would have been well
Yes. He smashed
impressed.
it.
But yeah. He thought these were the only suitable sports for ladies. Women at the time, they kept pushing for more and more inclusion. Absolutely. In 1904, archery was added, but then it was quickly removed in 1912. Didn't last long. And then even worse, at the Winter Games, which was also set up, no women were allowed at all until 1924. In 1924, they were only allowed to do the figure skating.
Seems like the selection of his argument is it's either going to be too erotic or too dangerous. Then he seems to have really gone in with the sexiest, most dangerous.
Sports.
Most,
Yeah.
I mean, golf is clearly the most aggressive sport. If anyone's seen Happy Gilmore, um,
Yeah, and the skimpiest outfits as well. Like,
yeah.
you don't want material on you in tennis or golf, do you? But yeah, absolutely. So that's the other timeline, basically. So we've got
Okay.
Baron's timeline and we've got Alice's timeline. Alice, thought Baron was doing his crap, was absolutely seething. There was a mass movement for women in the games, which was building and building rapidly. And Alice knew that she wanted to be at the heart of it. In France, the Federation of French Female Sports Societies was founded in December 1917 while the war was raging on. Alice became a treasurer of that really young, and because she was a widow in her 30s, it kind of gave her a bit of a lifeline in her life, and she was elected to president really quickly of that society. So she was part of quite an organised body for women in sport. Young Alice only had one goal in life: to create a programme of women's sports to be included in the Olympic Games. That was her goal. She set on it. You know, I imagine she manifested it. It was happening for her. And she decided the only way to do this is that she's got to go up against the establishment. She totally picked up on Baron as being her opponent. And it says here it's so dramatic. And he was not one man that could be easily beat. So she knew she was in for like an upheaval. You know what I mean? A quote from her at the time was, "I came up against a solid wall of refusal, which led me directly to create the Women Olympic Games."
Separate event.
Yes. So that quote I've written in my notes from ages ago reminded me of Michelle Obama when she was like, "When they go low, we go high." And even though that was like literally 100 years later,
Yeah.
the precedence is the same, isn't it? She is like, "Well, I'm going to go and do it anyway," basically.
Yeah.
Which
Just
is brilliant.
create your own rules and crack on.
Yeah. So Alice wanted all women in all Olympic Games and wouldn't accept no less. That was her goal. She was really clear on that. Alice was a cunning and intelligent woman. She knew that she didn't have a chance of getting women into the actual Olympics, so why not create her own games? Because she had this federation with her as well, she decided that she could hold a Women All Olympic Games, which included all sports open to men. Really, really specific. All sports open to men. This was at the start of the 1920s, a period of great cultural upheaval. So you're in between the two world wars. You've got kind of the feminist movement happening already.
Yeah.
They seized that opportunity. For many, like Alice, the fact that women were only allowed to compete in 2 Olympic sports in the 1920 Games in Antwerp was the straw that broke the camel's back. So she was like, no, I'm not doing it then. So it was definitely Baron's decisions that were leading her to do this. It was definitely
Hmm.
him that was making sure that it was happening. So the first game specifically for women, she got it happening. She got it up and running. It was held in Monte Carlo in 1921. Unsurprisingly, she found support hard to come by. So she had to do with whatever she could take her. Oh, what am I trying to say? She had to do with the best with what she got.
Yeah.
Like she had to be resourceful, which I think
Hmm.
is a theme of these stories, isn't it?
It's a definite theme, and that like making your own rules and going your own way, if they won't allow you to do it in the normal structure, make your own structure. And that
Yeah.
seems to be quite an effective, like, to prove the concept and get the acceptance there. And then the mainstream picks it up. And like with Althea talking about the particular tennis club that she went to and the sort of Black Tennis Players Association that she
Yeah.
was supported by and part of.
Yeah. And even someone who is like in quite a privileged position and in modern day, so someone like myself, what those stories tell me is that it's okay to be a rebel. Like it's okay to
Hmm.
make your own rules. And if you know that you're doing it for the right reasons, that is a
Yeah.
theme in these stories, isn't it? Just go and be a rebel and break the rules.
It's not, no, a lot of these rules are just arbitrarily decided by someone else, and they're self-appointed, who's to say they've got the better idea.
Yeah,
You know?
100%. So Alice did find support hard to come by. So she actually did the games, the Montreal Carlo games in a pigeon shooting field. She was just like, this will do. She got women from France, England, Italy, Norway, and Sweden to compete. Athletics and a basketball tournament were like the stars. They were like the big events of the show. The basketball was actually won by the British, much to the French upset.
That's the
Um,
last time.
it was so good that she did another one. So in 1922, it was even bigger. 300 ladies competed, representing 7 nations, and the game would be held every 4 years. It was decided at that point. In the end, 38 countries and 5 continents were there, and they didn't want to be quiet. They wanted to make a noise.
So this is a really powerful time then. Between the wars,
She's just
women into
capitalizing
the
on it. She's just
workforce.
making the most of the opportunity, which I
Yeah.
also like. I don't, and obviously some of that is outside her control. Obviously, I'm pretty sure she would have done it regardless, but it really gave momentum.
1928, when women got the vote,
Yeah.
was
And
all kicking off around then, isn't it?
yeah, I guess that's involved as well, isn't it, actually? Like this is just before that. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And also I think it was her beliefs as well. So Alice firmly believed that sport bred confidence and
Mhm.
helped develop her personality as it did for her. So it was using that tragedy or becoming a widow so early on to doing something monumental. She's saying that sport saved her life, and I'm sure that's true for so many people.
Mm.
So she did one as a trial, and the second one was her like official start. That actually took place in Paris in 1920, 102 years ago, where Olympics is still going on today. It was international, went really well, and then she was due to take place in the same city the next time round. On average, the first of Women Olympic Games drew a massive crowd of 15,000 people. Alice put special bus services on to get the spectators to the venue, and she actually made them the best that they can be. She was so
Mhm.
resourceful making it work properly, and she was actually kind of flaunting it in Baron's face because obviously he's French as well. He knew it was happening. She was
Yeah.
like, "Look at this." Despite all her effort, actually, it didn't get that much coverage in the media. So the Times could only do 100 words on it, and more words at the time, really sad little fact. So more words in the same edition was given to 500,000 herrings descending on Scarborough.
I, that's, hey, don't go knocking herring news. This is,
So more words were given to
this
that.
is the big event of the 1920s.
They refused to call the games the Women's Olympics because people didn't want to call it the Women's Olympics, basically, because they didn't want to like affiliate with it.
Mm.
But what happened was all this noise going on in Paris. Baron can't avoid it. What Baron's response to that was, "Oh, all right then, we'll add fencing. Women can join fencing in our side."
Another violent
So
sport.
it was a very small win. Um, So later on that year, things are working. So the governing body of athletes, which is called the IAAF, I didn't know that, decided to formally recognize women athletes, which is about time, really. And that is purely down to these games. Even though it acknowledged that women can be athletic, it stipulated that they should never be allowed to participate in the Olympics. Alice's organization unveiling their plans of the Women's Olympic, right? So that was her response to that. She was basically saying it's not good enough. So she unveiled formal games. They all went ahead. They were regularly drawing crowds of 20,000 people. They went all out to promote the games. Like I said, they were gaining influence, they were gaining power, and they were gaining traction. So much so that the International Olympic Committee, which I think is what it's called today, the IOC,
Yeah.
they actually tried to shut her down. Like it got that bad. They were like, and it's just pure sexism. They had no reason. Like,
Mm.
Baron had no reason other than sexism to shut it down. But Alice kept on demanding, she kept on pushing. She demanded that they should be allowed to participate in the Olympic Games in all events. The IOC, so Baron's organisation, was very much like, fine, fine, we'll let you into a few sports then, but not them all. He was like, okay, that'll do. And that was his way of stopping the revolution that she had started. He was like, you can do a little bit here and a little bit there, but I'm not
Just trying to placate them.
having it.
Was
Sorry?
just trying to placate them.
Yeah. And this
I'm
is where
guessing
it
it
goes.
wasn't very successful.
Well, I know, and this is the thing for Alice, like she was very strong on her morals and her goals and what she wanted. And she was like, no, it's all sports or nothing. Like, I'm going to carry on until you get us into all sports. Yeah.
Mm.
Baron had never met anyone with Alice's steely resolve, it says, and boundless courage, which is strong compliments, aren't they? Imagine being complimented that. Amazing. So, in response, the IOC, which is Baron's team, ordered a cease and desist on Alice's use of the word Olympics.
Been highly litigious to this day.
Yeah, that she
Really
would.
protective of.
Yeah. So, Alice, you're right, 100%. Alice agreed if the organisation would relent on its sexist position, then she would. In principle, Baron's team said, okay, fine. A vote was passed in 1926 that women's athletics would be added to the 1928 Olympic Games in Amsterdam. So she got it. She got athletics in there. So she managed to, first of all, have women's athletics acknowledged, and then she managed to get it in the game. I think that's pretty damn amazing, and also so unknown of. So if you think of all those women competing today, they're competing because of this. They're competing because of her, and because she made
And
such a noise.
yeah, so much like the inertia stand out, and people are maybe very happy to say, "Oh yeah, well I don't agree with it," but then they don't do anything.
Yeah,
And they don't actually speak out. And if you like ask people and do a survey, they may well be annoyed about it, but it takes what sounds like decades of resolve and
it's
work,
action, isn't it? Yeah,
and
yeah.
that sort of attitude of not just being. I'm not saying people shouldn't be grateful, but like his efforts to add one or two sports, it would have been all too easy to be, oh look, small victory. But
Yeah.
it sounds like she was just clear cut. It's all or nothing.
So this isn't really where the story ends, which is quite sad. It gets quite complicated. And I remember when I actually presented this at work, I couldn't do it in an entertaining way because it was basically what happens for the next however long is that Alice and Baron just take chunks out of each other. They just continue to fight on this case of the rest of her life, basically. And the image that I had in my presentation was, you know how giraffes fight? Just swing their necks at each other. And that's the image that I had of her the rest of her life with
Okay.
fighting Baron, basically. It's just that it was tit for tat all the way through because,
Yeah.
all right, they came to this agreement that in reality, like with many of these agreements, it didn't happen. So in the 1928 Olympics in Antwerp, for example, there were 5 events for women and there were 22 events for men. And Alice was like, that's not really good enough.
Yeah.
She's also up against the media as well. So Times newspaper, the Herring people, the Herring publication.
That's like we'll now forever know them. The Herring Times.
The Herring
Yeah.
Times. They said that the 800-meter race, which athletics, may not warrant a complete condemnation of the Girl Athletic Championships, but it certainly suggests unpleasant possibilities. So the idea that having women race is unpleasant. It also made me think of, when they wouldn't even allow women to do the marathon and they were like dragging that woman off the track.
Mm.
It's just, I don't understand. So after the Antwerp games, the next games, women's athletics were completely removed. Alice was growing tired. The French government also reduced the funding for her corporation, so the FSFI, in 1928, and they removed all funding by 1936. In 1932, at the Olympic Games, women were back in the athletics camp. They were allowed to compete that year, but until full inclusion was allowed, the Women's World Games would continue. So that's what she renamed it, the Women's World Games. In 1930, the Women's World Games were held in Prague over 4 days, drew 60,000 spectators. In 1934, they went again in London. So Alice never got her dream, essentially, in her lifetime. It never happened. She fought tooth and nail for so long, and it was like they gave a little bit, then they took it back, and they let women get a little bit more, and then they took it back, and it was just so hard. And
But they
it
never
is
sort of truly relented and changed their mind about it. They were just doing as little as they possibly could and obstructing as much as possible.
Yeah, and it continues up to today. So this is the first Olympic Games where the number of men and women is pretty much equal, and that's today. So even if she, I don't know, was like a Doctor Who and could live on forever and ever and ever, it'd be 100 years till she got what she was asking for and until she got what she wanted. It is so hard to get really accurate figures on this because you have mixed teams as well, like you have mixed doubles and stuff like that. So it is hard to get it. But the 2024 games will be the first, really, where it's like a proper equality. I think it's like 49.9% to 50.1% or something like that.
I never would have guessed it was still a thing, still an issue.
Well, it's really interesting because even the fact that France kind of see it as like a bit of a win now, like they use it as like a bit of a branding thing. So there was part of the article that I read that the logo of the Paris 2024 games is a woman's face, and they're like using it as a win, and it's like whoa.
Before we miss out all of the details.
Let's just completely ignore Alice's story completely then. But they are kind of totally writing her out of history.
Yeah. I wonder, are there any sports these days that women still aren't allowed or don't compete in?
I don't know, because they're in boxing, aren't they? I think they're in that speed climbing and boulder climbing.
Oh yeah, bouldering, definitely.
They're in swimming. I don't know, maybe there is. Someone will tell us, someone will correct us. But she does have a legacy, so this is not to undermine anything she achieved. She was the starting of this transcendence.
Yeah.
There is an Alice Milliat Foundation, which is the first European foundation dedicated to women's sports. It was founded in relation to what Alice was doing. In 2024, a book has been released called La Femme Olympique by Sophie Danger, and like I said, they've been included in the logo this year. The tagline for the Paris Olympic Games is for people, so it's allowing they're very much focused on inclusivity. But yeah, imagine if we didn't have her. You know what I mean? Like imagine
she really laid the groundwork and got it underway.
100%. So, and I think that's another important thing about these women is that fine, they don't have the accolades, they don't have the Nobel Peace Prizes, they don't have anything like that, but they did so much. They did so much groundwork to get her there. So, even though it's a messy story, I think it's a pretty cool one.
Definitely. I mean, you still just thinking about sport in general today. A lot more of it, and particularly like UFC, there's a lot more about fighters, women fighters in the UFC getting a lot of headlines. A lot more coverage, and in football, we've got the Lionesses. Yeah, they're getting a lot more, but still that preconception in like what are considered predominantly male sports, I guess, like football.
Yeah,
I still hear a lot of almost anger around like female commentators or female presenters or pundits or the coverage that it gets. Still irritated by that, as if they're a lesser version rather than just being another person who does this sport, who knows
That's
about this
such an
sport. So,
It's such an interesting take because when I was doing all that, I'd never even thought about there's a whole industry of support mechanisms, isn't there? There's the media, there's like you were saying, the pit girls and the ring girls. There's
mm,
so many roles in sport and jobs and things out there that I guess we
yeah,
don't see, do we? Like you see the odd coach, don't you, on the gymnastics rings and stuff like that. But you know, actually the inequality would have been there as well, wouldn't
yeah,
it? The inequality seeps out into so many
yeah.
things. So it's not
I mean,
just getting
maybe,
people in sport, is it?
no. And I mean, we're maybe now seeing the sort of generation that's coming through where more of the coaches used to be athletes and performers, and they're getting more
Mhm.
prominence. And now, like the female pundits in football have been foisted upon us in a good way. F1 racing, like the F1
Green.
presenting, on the
Yeah.
presenting staff, on the pundit staff. And I mean, I love F1, and the podcast I listen to the most, hosted by Jenny Gow most of the time. Uh, she's fabulous, and they have other female pundits, they have female engineers there. There's big drive in these things. So it's definitely not there yet, but it's still on this trajectory. In the sort of, I'm going to accuse the older generation of this, still in the older generation who grew up with men's sport
Yeah.
being very different to women's sport. There is still
It
this,
should just be sport, shouldn't it? Yeah.
it's just sport. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
it's,
also when you see, and also amazing when you see some, you know, those women on the podium collecting their golds and collecting, you know, Catherine Johnson Thompson, you know, she's set for, I don't know if she's got one, but she's going for a medal, isn't she? They're there because of this. They're there because of
yeah.
this lady right here, and I think that's it's such a cool story. So
Mm,
pleased that we've been able to tell people about it. It's great.
excellent. And I should say, for listeners, Althea that we're speaking about is Althea Gibson,
Yep,
who's the first black woman to win at Wimbledon, and
yep,
previous podcast subject. And give that a listen.
yep. And also we talk about people who aren't in sport. We're in a really sport heavy
Occasionally,
zone, aren't we?
the sport heavy zone. It's Olympic season, isn't it? Come on, let's get the sport ones out the way.
Yeah. But I
Um,
think we've got
and I
so
think
many other so exciting stories to tell you as well.
coming up, we've got pirates and female Schindler. So, you know,
Yeah, man. Stick around for those. What more do you want? That should be our trailer.
uh,
Brilliant. All right. Well,
great. Thanks, Vicky.
thanks. We'll see you soon.
Love it. Catch you soon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cheers, folks. Bye.